Hi, I'm Eden. I am a full-time artist living and working in San Francisco. I work pretty much exclusively in ink and watercolor. I just can't get enough of it. So this is the painting that is in the current exhibition at NUMU. I made this painting by superimposing different perspectives of the same clock. It's really about how time sort of collapsed for us in 2020, the way time I've read does when there's a large scale disaster going on. When I started these paintings, it was actually a month or two after the lockdown, and I just loved overlaying numbers. For me, it creates this impression that we usually only get in dreams, because in dreams, you can't actually read letters or numbers. Not a lot of people know that. It's a good way to find out if you're dreaming or not. Just open a book, see if you can read it. So if the letters are recognizable, you're probably dreaming or you're in another country. There's this sense in the painting that I made that we should be able to make sense of this clock face, but we just can't. There's this simultaneous stress and tedium going on in a disaster like a pandemic, and art can so easily turn into escapism. And I don't mean to say that that doesn't have its own value, but for me, especially as an artist, that wasn't really what I wanted in 2020. Like Stacy, I got a whole lot of commissions, like people needed art. See, people seem to need art more than ever. And I think anytime art moves you, and all good art does, it's not really an escape. You just end up kind of going full circle. And at the end of that, you're kind of looking at yourself and your situation in the face. And even when something terrible is happening, it's really a big comfort, to me at least, to be able to understand it better. So that's what this clock is about. This clock is illegible. It gives us no information about time or orientation, but it's still recognizably a clock. And now we get to posit other questions instead of staying stuck in a question we can't answer. What time is it? Because we can't answer that. Now we get to ask things like, why does it look like a clock if we can't read it? And that's very liberating. Next slide. So actually at the beginning of the pandemic, I was trying to handle big changes in caring for my baby daughter and caring for my elderly parents at the same time. We all live in the same city, which I'm really grateful for. And at first we saw each other only outside and sometimes through glass. So one way or another, I started spending a lot of time in gardens. And I got really fascinated with flowers and I started painting them, combining different angles and trying to get at the real character of this one flower species. And I found that very calming at the beginning of this pandemic where none of us really knew it was going to happen. Fortunately, mid-March is definitely springtime in San Francisco, so everybody's gardens were blooming and the flowers just felt like placeholders for neighbors who were sheltering in place or even sick or maybe in quarantine. The garden flowers were like reminders that, hey, somebody lives here. And that gave me a lot of hope and energy when I really needed it, painting these flowers as they grew and changed while the rest of the world seemed like it had stopped or frozen. Next slide. So this painting is not actually finished. I started this originally at the beginning of 2020 before the lockdown, and I was really sure I had ruined it. And so I put it away. Honestly, I was so mad, I almost tore it in pieces because I had reproduced this 1805 map of Stockholm, super into maps. I used to be an urban planner, on a huge, thick, expensive sheet of watercolor paper, like 5 days of 8-hour, studio days. And I just impulsively did some irreversible stuff to it, and I just hated how it looked. And finally, this month, January 2021, it really started feeling like there was some hope. And I didn't have to just live day to day, and I could, like, the future somehow existed again. And I started going through my old artwork, and I looked at this painting again, and I thought, maybe I can save this. And so I started just making more of Stockholm. Like, I invented these coastlines and landforms and groups of buildings and streets. There's a whole lot of stuff here that doesn't exist anywhere in the world. Parceling out land that didn't exist and ocean that didn't exist. And as I layered the maps on top of each other, they just got more and more wild and started looking less and less like the real Stockholm, which I've actually visited twice, back in June 2015 and then again in December 2017. So it became even less like the modern map of Stockholm than it originally was, but more like my experience of Stockholm. So making something I had thought was totally unsalvageable into the start of a beautiful and meaningful new painting series, doing world building, these feel like really good activities for the second year of COVID. I try to make art that always surprises me and makes me ask new kinds of questions instead of dwelling on questions that have no answer. So the questions I'm asking with this painting is, what kind of place do we want to live in? How can we make that kind of place for ourselves? And can we create safe and enriching spaces to share with others? And my background in environmental science and urban planning is really coming out here, but the maps honestly seem like a continuation of my approach to the clock paintings. It's not just about freeing yourself from a situation and looking at yourself, and freeing yourself from, what is this clock? What is this clock telling me? What time is it? It's also about looking at your situation from your new point of freedom and changing it. And I've really been enjoying getting back to my studio recently. My commissions are my commissions are kind of getting bigger and a little bit less frequent now, so I have more space to work on my own ideas, and I feel really hopeful about this year. So, and I'm really happy to be in this exhibit. Thank you so much.